truth is the most convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I'll tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
It's Thursday, June 1st, 2023, the 862nd day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. A warm welcome and hello to all of you listening to the podcast on the day of its release. The only way to do that is by becoming a paid subscriber at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as little as $50 a year or $5 a month, and in doing so, you will be supporting me, the work I do, and this show as it expands. And if you can't, or you simply don't want to, continue listening to the podcast for free on a wide variety of podcast platforms, and of course, Rumble. All I ask is that you share it with your friends. You can find the links to the podcast, the writing, the social media, and the merch site by visiting linktree.com/I'mYourModerator. So the last couple of days, we've been talking about what it means to be able to hear Trump. And I played the clip from the classic 90s film, White Men Can't Jump, where Wesley Snipes' character and Woody Harrelson's character are engaged in an argument as they drive along in the car. Woody pops in a cassette tape of Jimi Hendrix, and Wesley Snipes' character says, "You can't hear Jimmy because you're not black." There is something about blackness that imparts the proper context, the proper mindset, and the proper worldview that would allow one to hear Jimmy, even though there were white people in Jimmy's band who must have been able to hear him somehow. The point is, if you don't have the proper context, if you're not listening the way the person means it, if you're not giving a person the benefit of the doubt, then you're unlikely to understand the message they are trying to give you. And I paralleled that with Donald Trump's experience communicating with people like Kim Jong-un when he said that he has a big red button. It's bigger than Kim's button, and his button actually works. And we were told that we were going to have a nuclear meltdown. Donald Trump was courting danger. Kim Jong-un was going to nuke all of California, and it would be all Donald Trump's fault for being so irresponsible on Twitter. Well, last week he truthed out a very similar post, this time directed at Ron DeSantis. And I talked about the fact that Donald Trump knows what he's saying. The person on the receiving end of Donald Trump's message knows what he's saying. And the people in the global regime who need to know what Donald Trump's saying all know what Donald Trump is saying. Donald Trump's supporters may not know what he's saying, but they have some guesses. And those guesses are usually ballpark correct. Because we pay attention to him, we listen to him, we give him the benefit of the doubt, we try to figure out what it is he really means inside a bigger and broader context that we are also highly informed about. The only people who don't know what Donald Trump's saying are the ones who continually get upset at everything Donald Trump says. For 8 years now, the first reaction is always emotional and it's always wrong. They say, "What is he even talking about? That's so stupid." But they don't know what he means, and it turns out that maybe they're the stupid ones. Donald Trump's message could be as simple as this to both Kim Jong-un and Ron DeSantis. Whatever it is you're thinking of doing right now or threatening to do right now, I promise you that I can do that thing to you 10 times worse than you're about to do it, and it'll actually work when I do it because the people are on my side and the truth is on my side. That is a message that can be delivered to Kim Jong-un a few years ago and can be delivered to Ron DeSantis right now. And it makes sense in both cases. Hence the parallel meaning, hence the parallel language and style of presentation. That's so stupid. What does it mean is not the right reaction to have. In fact, that's never the right reaction to have. So people can't hear Trump because they don't know the context. They don't give him the benefit of the doubt. We talked about how people can't hear Trump because of his voice. He doesn't have that refined college voice and that manner of speaking like the people on TV have, where they always sound like they have a lot of authority and gravitas while they speak to the public like children. And the public, being mostly composed of child brains, enjoys when they are spoken to like children by people with authoritative voices, because that tells them, hey, you don't need to think about this. The smart people have already taken care of it. And you, as a smart person, know when you can trust your fellow smart people. Here we are saying, hey, smart people, trust us. End of story. You got it. You don't have to listen to people like Donald Trump or people like Mike Lindell, who speak in a more gruff manner. They're a little more plain spoken. They use some words that aren't approved of by the college crowd, the very smart people. They'll talk about subjects that we are told you're not supposed to talk about in polite company. And they will mock and ridicule people who are well worthy of mocking and ridicule. But again, we're told they're not allowed to do that by the members of the party of false decorum, because that is not proper decorum. You can't just go around mocking and ridiculing people just because they're stupid and evil. You're supposed to be nice to everybody. That is why when someone says, you can't mock us, you can never talk about any of those things again. You should just never talk about how they're lying or how they're stupid or how they're evil. Those are all off limits because it's rude. So you can't hear Trump because of his voice and his manner of speaking, because he's rude. That's not the right way to speak. We don't need to listen. We don't need to take Donald Trump seriously. And why else can people not hear Trump? Well, because they have emotional reactions to everything Trump says immediately. And when they have that triggered emotional reaction, they have to figure out what justifies it. What has made them so mad? Well, it must be Donald Trump. He's the one whose words are being discussed. And if Donald Trump has made them mad, then Donald Trump is a very, very bad man for making them mad. Now they just have to figure out why Donald Trump made them mad and then tell everybody about it so that everybody else knows. It's okay to be very, very mad at Donald Trump whenever he does anything like this. And so he called Kayleigh McEnany milquetoast. And the world erupted into flames because how dare Donald Trump say those words about that nice lady? Kayleigh McEnany is a wonderful person. Everybody agrees. And about 1% of the people agreeing with that statement actually know Kayleigh McEnany and have spent any time following Kayleigh McEnany. Now, she was the White House press secretary, so a lot of people are familiar with her on TV when she was going through all of the COVID press conferences. And she's been on Fox News virtually ever since, doesn't talk a whole lot about election fraud, doesn't do a whole lot to support Donald Trump, but people imagine that they are very, very familiar with them. Kayleigh is certainly on their side. And plus, she's so young and lovely and personable that she must be a great person. There's just no other way around it. Therefore, if Donald Trump insults her, it is a grave moral sin. How could he do this to someone who went out there and spoke for him every day? Now, did Kayleigh McEnany always say the right things to help and protect the president, Donald Trump? Well, no, she didn't. And any person who actually has paid attention to Kayleigh McEnany would know that. Now, is Kayleigh McEnany a bad person or a bad press secretary for not always getting the answers right? No, she's not. I'm not claiming she is. But there is at least the possibility that Kayleigh McEnany was serving multiple masters at that time. And as soon as the Donald Trump thing ended, she just went solely on with her other master. Is it possible that Kayleigh McEnany at various points misrepresented Donald Trump and his administration in important ways throughout COVID and throughout the post-election period. But in the circumstances, Donald Trump really couldn't say anything about his press secretary because she's the one out there speaking for him to the nation through those crucial times. Maybe it's a low probability likelihood, but it's at least possible. It's possible that Donald Trump has plenty of legitimate reasons to be angry at Kayleigh McEnany that we simply don't know about. And that's just fine. It's also fine that we don't know about them. Maybe one day we will find out about them and we will say, oh, my. Donald Trump was totally justified in making that statement, just as he usually is with all those statements people get very, very mad at. And our pal Kate made a good point about this over on Twitter at Kate_awakening. Trump's antics are undefeated at exposing everyone who's being driven by emotion instead of logic. And that is exactly right. That is exactly what Trump is doing. And I've talked about this on the podcast before. I've had conversations in real life about all this before with friends and whatnot. Donald Trump makes people mad on purpose so that he can see how they react. If people don't want to believe that, if people think that that is outlandish, fine. Believe whatever you want and continue to misunderstand Donald Trump if you choose. Everyone has the right to do that. Everyone has the right to be sick and tired of Donald Trump, think that that is the most important thing happening in the world, your sickness and tiredness of Donald Trump, and then never listen to the man again. That is your option. And if he has driven you to that with all these irresponsible statements, then stand on that and just say that. But we don't have to pretend that he's just being stupid and mouthing off. He knows exactly what he's doing. Everyone shows their true colors immediately after he does this stuff, and it is so starkly obvious every time. In fact, yesterday I shared the headlines, and I shared the fact that outlets like Huffington Post are reacting to Trump's statements about Kayleigh McEnany the same way that the Ron people are and that all of these normie establishment conservatives are. Why is Donald Trump saying these very stupid, mean things? It's so important that he's doing this, and I just don't think we can have a man like this representing us for another 5 years. Okay. You sound like the Huffington Post, but okay. And if you want to sound like the Huffington Post, that's okay too. Because you know who else sounds like the Huffington Post? The Daily Wire, who reacted the exact same way. And we talked about this a bit yesterday too. The Daily Wire and these other outlets were constantly told that these people are walking the people on the left in our direction. And at some point, they're going to wake up and come over to us. And a lot of the people listening to the Daily Wire from a Uniparty right perspective, an establishment conservative perspective, see all of this as progress. They're like, look, you're getting people I know and have to deal with in my own personal life, in my social life, in my day-to-day situations. You're getting them to be a little less insane about a few of these subjects. And that's a really big help to me because I don't want to have to argue about all this stuff all the time with these crazy people. I get it. The problem is that at the same time, those people on the far left are being dragged toward the middle where they are easier for you to deal with. You are being dragged to the middle so that you're easier for them to deal with. And they feel good about it too, which is why they're so happy to agree to meet on those points within that Daily Wire bubble. And you'll be a little bit to the right of them and they'll be a little bit to the left of you. So you can still tease one another on the playground. And it's fun. It's fun. But if you want to get things fixed, that's never going to work. Their job is to keep people inside the mainstream narrative, the central narrative. The official story must be accepted, and then we can show you a range of opinions that you might like to apply to yourself as part of your own personal branding to show everybody how unique your political positions are. They will present you with the full range of opinions within the central narrative, and then they will let you choose your own after they have made fun of all the other opinions besides the one you chose. They'll present it in a way that makes you feel heroic because you know they are heroic, and you will still be stuck inside a totally irrational, insane, false reality information bubble in that cushy middle with all those insane leftists. And you can't get out because you are stuck in Ben Shapiro's diner and you just can't get over how good the coffee is. Now, they all run out there telling everybody the most important thing in the world is that Donald Trump has said something bad about Kayleigh McEnany. This is so important. He is just not mature enough to lead this country. He is just not up to the moment. He is just always going to do this, and everybody's always going to get really sad. Everybody's just got to deal with their emotions again and again. Like, I don't want to hate Donald Trump. I just want to tell everybody that I voted for him twice. Why can't they just accept that I voted for him twice and that I like to be really upset about him? Okay, guys. Okay. We get it. Yeah, you're upset again. Maybe in a couple of years you might get around to being upset about the fact that our elections are stolen and that the country has been usurped and that we have an old, corrupt pervert pretending to be president while the people you continue to listen to on the television tell you it's all real and legitimate. And in order to get out of this hellscape, you need to vote for someone else in that rigged system. Because once you do that, that person is going to fix it. And then we won't have the old, corrupt pervert. We'll have someone who's younger, totally unvetted, and still entered office through a fraudulent election and never said a thing. What an improvement. So there are people that can't hear Donald Trump because of the context and the fact that they won't give him the benefit of the doubt. There are people that can't hear Donald Trump because they just don't like the sound of his voice. It's not the sound of a serious person's voice, and if the person doesn't have a serious sounding voice, you can't listen to him. And you can't hear him because you react emotionally every time he speaks, and that takes over all the thought process. There's no thinking beyond that. The emotion is confirmation that your original assessment of Donald Trump is 100% true. You were right all along to despise him, and he has proven once again that he is a very small man, not like you, Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin, by the way, who used to kiss Donald Trump's ass nonstop. But it occurs to me that there is another way that people can't hear Trump. They can't hear Trump because everything relevant and important that Donald Trump does is drowned out in the media by focusing on something else Donald Trump did. And because virtually everything Donald Trump does becomes newsworthy, it's easy to distract from what the central things actually are. So everybody heard that Donald Trump talked about his big red button like he did with Kim Jong-un, but this time directed at Ron DeSantis. Everybody heard that Donald Trump called Kayleigh McEnany milquetoast, one of the worst things that anyone could ever be called. But very few people heard Donald Trump's actual statements over the past 2 days, so I would like to play those. Because we've been told that Donald Trump is focused on all this nonsense in these personal vendettas and is not focused on the real issues, not like Ron DeSantis, who's traveling around the country on a broken bus and speaking to literally tens of people at a time. But you see, Ron is a serious candidate. He's speaking about the serious issues, just not about election fraud or the war in Ukraine or what might happen with China and Taiwan, etc., etc. But very, very serious and important issues, which means just wokeism all the time. It's only about woke stuff all the time. We can figure out who has wee-wees and hoo-ha's and you can't. Oh, yes, we're the greatest. Vote for us. Thank you. Not that all of that isn't the most important thing. So important that you got to talk about it 24/7 on where? Oh, yeah, the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire talks about woke stuff 24/7. Isn't that incredible? They were wrong about election fraud. They were wrong about everything COVID. They were wrong about vaccines. They were wrong about Ukraine. But, oh, they figured out what issue was the most important. It's wokeness. And they're absolutely right about that. And you can't question their priorities because they're the real conservatives. At least that's what they say. They're the conservatives. Truthfully, they're neocons, neo-conservatives, but that's the real conservatives now because neocons is just what it is to be Republican now, right? Everybody agrees with that. Neocon, that's just how it is. It's been that way since Bush. All of these people were and are Bush supporters. They still work with whatever remains of the Bush political family and the other Republican political dynasties and donor dynasties in the country. These are the people they work with, and they work with the transnational corporations and donors who are part of the World Economic Forum and the global governance organizations. But besides that, they are conservatives. They do work with that whole neocon network, but they're conservatives, except, so here's the thing. Neoconservatism was born out of Marxism. And I know people are like, that can't be so, or no one would be allowed to call them conservatives. Except it is so. And you can look it up. Look at their descent from Trotsky and Strauss and Marx. It's exactly where it came from. Communism has been slipped into the definition of conservatism, and nobody really notices it because it says conservative in there. And they are so good at the whole wee-wee and hoo-ha thing. They must be conservatives. But they're not conservatives, and they're not going to set the country back on the right path. They're going to tell you it's going to take 2 or 3 years to figure out that DEI problem in your local school. Why? Because they can't talk about election fraud. If they could talk about election fraud, they could tell you, hey, George Soros has been paying for school board elections for a really long time. So it turns out not only are there Soros district attorneys around the country, Ron went out and got one of those. He's the Soros fighter. There are Soros people in your city councils and your school boards. And if you didn't have them there, if stolen elections didn't put them there, if George Soros's election fraud apparatus didn't install them in those offices, well, your school wouldn't have those policies. So you want to fix the whole thing? Fix election fraud. And stop talking about how in 2 or 3 years you're going to get DEI removed from the school, when really all you're going to do is have them change the name and bring it right back in while you're not looking, because you're not going to be looking. You're going to tell everybody that the problem was solved, and the problem's just going to start getting worse again. But you will find 1 or 2 or 10 people who led the cause, and then you're going to make them national heroes, and they'll write books, they'll have massive payoffs, and then they will be linked into the same regime where they will slowly give away all of the former priorities that they were representing, and you'll be right back in the shit again because you didn't solve the problem because no one talked about election fraud. Now, if you want to solve problems that way, enjoy not having your problems solved. But it's your choice. At least sticking down that path, you get to pretend that you are way ahead of the leftists who you are teasing on the playground and hoping that one day they will wake up, even though they have made it quite clear that they will not wake up and do not want to wake up. In fact, they define themselves by being the opposite of you, just as you define yourself by being the opposite of them. All that matters is principles and consequences, and none of that favors the current position being held by the conservative, neoconservative establishment. So let's hear what Trump's been talking about this week, because he's released a couple of significant statements. Here's the first one.
Joe Biden has launched an illegal foreign invasion of our country, allowing a record number of illegal aliens to storm across our borders. From all over the world they came. Under Biden's current policies, even though these millions of illegal border crossers have entered the country unlawfully, all of their future children will become automatic U.S. citizens. Can you imagine? They'll be eligible for welfare, taxpayer-funded health care, the right to vote, chain migration, and countless other government benefits, many of which will also profit the illegal alien parents. This policy is a reward for breaking the laws of the United States and is obviously a magnet helping draw the flood of illegals across our borders. They come by the millions and millions and millions. They come from mental institutions. They come from jails, prisoners, some of the toughest, meanest people you'll ever see. The United States is among the only countries in the world that says that even if neither parent is a citizen nor even lawfully in the country, their future children are automatic citizens the moment the parents trespass onto our soil. As has been laid out by many scholars, this current policy is based on a historical myth and a willful misinterpretation of the law by the open borders advocates. There aren't that many of them around. It's amazing. Who wants this? Who wants to have prisoners coming into our country? Who wants to have people who are very sick coming into our country? People from mental institutions coming into our country? And come they will. They're coming by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. As part of my plan to secure the border on day one of my new term in office, I will sign an executive order making clear to federal agencies that under the correct interpretation of the law, going forward, the future children of illegal aliens will not receive automatic U.S. citizenship. It's things like this that bring millions of people to our country, and they enter our country illegally. My policy will choke off a major incentive for continued illegal immigration, deter more migrants from coming, and encourage many of the aliens Joe Biden has unlawfully let into our country to go back to their home countries. They must go back. Nobody could afford this. Nobody could do this. And even morally, it's so wrong. My order will also end their unfair practice known as birth tourism, where hundreds of thousands of people from all over the planet squat in hotels for their last few weeks of pregnancy to illegitimately and illegally obtain U.S. citizenship for the child, often to later exploit chain migration to jump the line and get green cards for themselves and their family members. It's a practice that's so horrible and so egregious, but we let it go forward. At least one parent will have to be a citizen or a legal resident in order to qualify. We will secure our borders and we will restore our sovereignty starting on day one. Our country will be great again. Our country will be a country again. We'll have borders. We'll have proper education, and we'll put America first. Thank you.
Now, that is a very reasonable, sober statement by President Donald Trump. He didn't talk about his big red button. He didn't call somebody milquetoast. He just laid out a specific policy proposal that will absolutely curtail illegal immigration. It takes away one of the attractive aspects for illegal immigrants to cross our borders. And it takes away one of the elements of the system that has been created to bring in more and more illegal immigrants through human trafficking in what is absolutely and unequivocally a global slave trade. Now, the thing about the milquetoast post with Kayleigh, as I mentioned yesterday, is that because he insulted her and because the reaction was so dramatic and so emotional, what ended up happening was all of the people doing comms for the Ron campaign who are looking for creative new ways to hit Donald Trump, all of them total failures. In doing that and getting upset and posting nonstop about Donald Trump's comments, they made the entire story viral. And what the story was that Donald Trump was dominating Ron DeSantis in the polls, either by 25 points or 34 points. And now everybody knows it. And the people trying to take down Trump just told everybody that Trump is destroying their guy by massive numbers. They made it go viral because Trump baited their emotional reaction, and they reacted in a way that ultimately helped Trump. They were trying to hurt Trump, and they helped him. That's because they're incompetent. But you have something totally different here. Donald Trump doesn't need to be extra provocative and trigger people in order for this sort of thing to go viral. This is an issue that has been talked about before and has gone viral before. Birthright citizenship. Donald Trump is trying to get rid of it, to take away one of the attractive things that justifies the global slave trade. And he tried to do it before as well. And this issue has already gone viral for it. Why? Because they want to call him a racist. because the 14th Amendment is what guarantees this birthright citizenship. And they put that in to solve slavery. And it's not because we were selling our country back to the global regime and they wanted ownership over all the citizens, not just the slaves. That's not why they did it. But anyway, they got upset Donald Trump was trying to tear down the 14th Amendment. What a bad guy. Now, what did we just hear the 14th Amendment was going to be used for? Oh, that's right. They were going to try to use the 14th Amendment to claim that we had to raise the debt ceiling no matter what. That's what they were just about to use the same law for. Isn't that so strange? How could the same amendment have provisions about our debt in the same thing where there's birthright citizenship, especially because this was all about the Civil War and making sure that Republicans couldn't have slaves anymore, even though the Democrats were the slave-holding party. And even though slave ownership in America was just an outgrowth of slave ownership in Europe, all of it run by the same global regime and the same Prussian Empire who just ships their practices around the world. But we can forget about all that because the Civil War was fought to save those slaves and never have slavery in America ever again, at least until now. And yeah, it's the same regime and the same people doing it. But hey, you can't say that. We solved this problem through the 14th Amendment. That also solved that debt ceiling problem forever. And we know that all of that was good because it solved slavery, which eventually will probably solve racism, even though they're making racism so much worse right now. And yes, it's the same people who had the slavery then and who run the slave trade now. They're the same people who focus on race all the time and make race relations much, much, much worse. But it's just because they're trying to solve racism. So it was all about racism and solving racism, that 14th Amendment, and definitely not about anything else, especially not selling our country back to the global regime. And even though Trump is trying to take down the global regime and turn power back over to the people, it's surely unrelated to this. It's just about birthright citizenship and just about racism. But no one knows about this because no one can hear Trump. Not with the clamor over milk toast. You know, the important things that the serious people are focused on. The serious people who spend the rest of the day, now 8 weeks in, talking about Bud Light, obsessed with Target, talking about we know who has hoo-has and who has wee-wees, and we are superior. Bow down to our superior knowledge, our superior sense of justice, and we need to get rid of Donald Trump. Why won't he just go away? Why won't he just go away so that we can just stop talking about him and everything will go back to normal? Everything will feel better again. We will be friends with our other friends in the classroom, and we will talk about who has wee-wees and who has hoo-has. And everything will be all better. We just need to listen to the serious people while they talk about woke stuff and Bud Light, and they talk about racisms, and we will not talk about Trump's policies ever. He just needs to go away. Okay. You are the real conservatives, which, you know, now means neocons. And neocons, of course, come out of Marxism. But yeah, all right. Real conservatives. You're nothing like the left. I know you hate the left. You're always fighting the left about wee-wees and hoo-has. Yes, it's very exciting. Yes, you're such vicious opponents. And you only focus on the important stuff like when Trump sends mean tweets and not when Trump actually makes policy statements, of which he's made something like 50 at this point, or maybe it's 30. I don't know. It's a lot. And pretty much all of them sound pretty damn good to everybody. Some people got a little bit upset about the freedom cities. They were like, oh, he's talking about those smart cities. Donald Trump is just trying to lead us to ruin. He's just another one of those technocratic globalists, and he's got us all fooled. Well, guys, hey. If that's the case, if Donald Trump is the technocratic globalist and it's not all the guys in the regime who everyone is saying we should support instead, I guess at that point we're screwed. Okay? I would admit at that point we are screwed. If Donald Trump is one of the bad guys, if he comes out as one of the bad guys, well, yeah, guys, okay, we're black-pilled at that point. We are screwed at that point. And, I mean, you know, no, we're not. At that point, we would be like, damn, that's really going to make things difficult. We're going to have to unwind a lot of incorrect suppositions and figure out exactly how to deal with this thing now. It seems like maybe we've made an enormous mistake. People would be like, ha ha ha, we told you you made a mistake. Except those people are still the ones who wore masks in their cars. Those are the ones who said it was okay to support Ukrainian Nazis because a Jewish person, or so we're told, is leading that Nazi army, so they're okay this time. And also, Vladimir Putin is really, really bad. They're the people who injected themselves with a toxic experimental substance that can't protect them from a disease that can't kill them because the television told them to. So would being absolutely wrong in a totally opposite way about Trump be bad? Yeah, but it's not as bad as wearing masks in your car. It is also so utterly improbable as to deem it almost impossible and not really spend too much time on it. So freedom cities, I know, very upsetting, just like 15-minute cities and smart cities. And they must be the same because they're cities in the future. And I guess there's only one way to do that, and it's the way that turns every city into a concentration camp. Good point, guys. A lot of foresight there. Okay. But besides that one, people have been pretty pleased with Donald Trump's policy statements. They're all right on. He's incorporating all the relevant aspects of reality. He is rejecting the central narrative. He is rejecting political correctness, as he did in the statement I just played. And he is setting out a proper policy course for this country that will set this country back on the right track. Donald Trump's not worried about being called racist when he's talking about what the proper policy is. He's done that at every point since he came down the escalator. He has not cared about political correctness at all. He has not allowed them to silence him, and he has not allowed the media to run him over on any of it. And we are told that Ron is going to be a better fighter against wokeness than the guy who has said the right thing and actually taken the heat for it for 8 years. All of this is so insane. But what else is Donald Trump thinking of doing? Well, his other video statement that he released yesterday is about America's celebration of its own 250th birthday, the 250th anniversary of American independence, which will be coming up in just 3 short years. Donald Trump is planning for it. He had started planning for it back in 2020. And he's letting us know that his plans are still on course. Well, how can that be? He doesn't know he's going to win the election next year. Donald Trump doesn't know that he's going to win. He doesn't know that he's going to be president again. Oh, I know, guys. I know. You're always so ahead of the game. You're so right. We're so crazy saying things that are going to happen. I mean, yes, they do eventually happen almost all the time, whereas none of your predictions ever work ever. But maybe you're right and we're wrong on this one. Donald Trump is never going to be president again, and we will not be celebrating this nation in 2026. But that said, I know you're very smart and we're very stupid. I get it. We're so bad. Listen to this clip.
3 years from now, the United States will celebrate the biggest and most important milestone in our country's history. 250 years of American independence. What a great country. We have to keep it that way. But that's why, as a nation, we should be preparing for a most spectacular birthday party. We want to make it the best of all time. Here is my plan to give America's founding in 1776 the incredible anniversary it truly deserves. On day one, I will convene a White House task force called Salute to America 250. It will be responsible for coordinating with state and local governments to ensure not just one day of celebration, but an entire year of festivities across the nation, starting on Memorial Day 2025 and continuing through July 4th, 2026. Second, I will work with all 50 governors, Republican and Democrat alike, to create the Great American State Fair, a unique one-year exhibition featuring pavilions from all 50 states. It'll be something. The Great American State Fair will showcase the glory of every state in the Union, promote pride in our history, and put forth innovative visions for America's future. My hope is that the amazing people of Iowa will work with my administration to open up the legendary Iowa State Fairgrounds to host the Great American State Fair and welcome millions and millions of visitors from around the world to the heartland of America for this special one-time festival. Together we will build it and they will come. Third, alongside the Great American State Fair, we will host major sporting contests for high school athletes. These are great athletes, wonderful athletes from fantastic high schools all around the country. These Patriot Games will allow young Americans from every state to show off the best of American skills, sportsmanship, and competitive spirit. Fourth, I will sign an executive order to bring back our National Garden of American Heroes, which we want to build very badly. Commission artists for the first 100 statues to populate this new statuary park honoring the greatest Americans of all time. Fifth, as president, I will invite the leaders and citizens of nations around the world to visit the United States in honor of our 250th anniversary. It's going to be great. America's tourist industry should get ready because we're going to have a lot of people coming. It will be a record year. And finally, and most importantly, I will ask America's great religious communities to pray for our nation and our people as we prepare for this momentous occasion. From the very beginning, America has been a country sustained and strengthened by prayer and by our communities of faith. As we chart a course toward the next 250 years, let us come together and rededicate ourselves as one nation under God. Thank you.
Now, this is something that Donald Trump has been focused on since early July of 2020. You may remember that Donald Trump did a 4th of July celebratory speech on July 3rd, 2020 at Mount Rushmore. It was an incredible speech. They did a big fireworks show over Mount Rushmore. The whole day was pretty spectacular, just optically and patriotically. It's a really great display. Trump is a showman, and it was a wonderful show honoring America and America's heritage. He talked about the National Park of Monuments to American Heroes. That's something he put into process in 2020, and Joe Biden rescinded that executive order once he became fake president. Trump intended to create what he called the National Garden of American Heroes. You heard him mention that he was going to commission artists to build these wonderful statues, actual good statues that people like to look at, not all the statues that we see being put up all over the place now that look like nothing, just terrible abstract art. Sometimes they try to make replicas of people and they look absolutely nothing like those people. You might remember the two arms embracing last year that we were shown by the communists, and it actually looked like, well, something sexually suggestive that I probably should not describe. We had the awful statue of George Floyd. We had the awful statue of the soccer player Cristiano Ronaldo. We had that lovely monument of an Afro pick. And that's when you remember that communist art is supposed to be terrible. That's part of the point. Trump initially chose 31 people for the National Garden of American Heroes, and that list ended up being expanded to 244 historical figures, 52 of them women, and there were a wide variety of ethnicities, so no one can get mad. You had everyone from Billie Holiday to Kobe Bryant to John Adams and Sam Adams and Muhammad Ali and William F. Buckley Jr. and Franklin Delano Roosevelt to Elvis Presley to Miles Davis. And for some reason, Michael Jordan is not on this list. And maybe this is the first time I have seen a good reason not to vote for Donald Trump. But I'm sure we can get Michael Jordan taken care of at some point. We'll have to raise that up on the priority list. I get it. Not all of my priorities are good. But hey, some things are just important. Some things are just right, and they're not right until they're right. And nothing can be right until Michael Jordan gets his statue. If Kobe's going to get one, Jordan has to have one. There's just no question about it. So a project that Trump started in 2020 and Biden tried to cancel is going to come right back, and it's going to happen because it's got to be ready for America's birthday in 2026. Donald Trump sounds quite ready to prepare for all of this. And we've been getting told by Ron DeSantis that one of the advantages of electing Ron DeSantis is that he is going to have 8 years to fix these problems, whereas Donald Trump is only going to have 4 years. And then we're going to have to move on to somebody else. So we might as well already move on. And in some worlds, that is, I guess, a logical, rational argument. Hey, let's take this worst thing. It's better to have this worst thing for 8 years than it is to have the best thing for 4. What? But hey, logic, it doesn't come easily to people who actually believe that the country is just going to forget about stolen elections and move on with Ron. But Trump addressed this rather amusing phenomenon as well in Iowa.
I've been watching DeSantis go out and say, I've got 8 years. It's going to be 8 years. Let me tell you something. Right there, you should vote against him. It'll take me 6 months to have it totally the way it was. We'll have it fast. It's drilling, it's the wall, and it's getting criminals out of our country that have been allowed to come in so freely.
He's going to come back, and when he does, things are going to be set on the right track really quickly. He is very confident in that. Why is he very confident in that? Is he just lying to the nation? He's just making things up to make himself sound good, to make himself sound better than Ron DeSantis so that he can win the primary and then win the general election, all for his ego, all so that he can make more money, all because Donald Trump wants the power, all because he's trying to stay out of prison. That's what we're told. Donald Trump wants to be president again so he can stay out of prison. Yeah, guys, sure, that's it. Or maybe he just knows what's going on. He knows that the elections were stolen. He knows that all of that is still being pursued. He knows that he didn't concede. He knows that he is actually far more popular than the polls show because the polls are not direct information. And it's so silly to even pretend they might be and that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's dealing with. We know that the tech companies own, access all of our information. All of our information. Everything that's on our phones and our computers, every word we speak around listening devices that we choose to put in our own homes and turn them on so they will listen to us. We know that all that stuff goes into the cloud database. It all gets analyzed. It all gets compartmentalized. They have a pure tracking of us and everything we do and say and think and type. Everywhere we go and who we visit. Everything we buy, they know all of it. You think they don't know who has the political majority in this country? Of course they know. They don't need polling. The regime knows. Trump knows. They have this sort of access to data. They have all the access to data they need. Donald Trump was president, for crying out loud. He knows more than the people at the Daily Wire. And I respect the people out there doing polls and trying to get a good picture of what the American public looks like. But he knows more than the pollsters, too. And the Democrats know it. The regime knows it. Everybody knows it. All the cards at that level are on the table. It is only leverage. It's only corruption. It's only compromise. It's not what we see playing out in person. If any of the global regime's positions actually held majority support, the propaganda and the censorship would not be necessary. And we see propaganda and censorship all the time, which means they know the people don't like what they're doing and they need to convince the people otherwise. So people are actually ahead of what we understand to be reality as it is available to us in real time. There are people who know what is going to happen in the future because they are making the deals that put that future in place. We hear organizations like the World Economic Forum telling us all the time, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. We're going to have a pandemic in the next few years. Someday you will own nothing and you will be happy. They're telling us about the future because they're going to be constructing that future. That is their plan. They go according to that plan. Now, if you know that plan and you're trying to thwart that plan, then you would have a plan as well. And then again, it's just leverage, corruption, compromise, whatever, that makes up the real battle between those two plans. And all of that is being fought at a very high level, not the one that we are seeing in the media conversation. Donald Trump knows the plan. He knows what's going to happen in the future. He's telling the people, he's messaging about what is going to happen in the future, and the global regime is getting that message. They know what he's saying is going to happen in the future. They know what they want to have happen in the future, and then it's just a matter of who's right. Now, at a certain point in those negotiations, one side knows that they have won, and that doesn't mean that everybody else is going to understand it all the way down to the little people, the villagers out there listening to Ben Shapiro's every word or Rachel Maddow's every word. They certainly don't know what's going on. There's no doubt about that. And by the way, I'm not claiming I do either, but I am quite certain that people with a lot more knowledge than me know what's going to happen in the next few months, probably down to the timing of events. And yes, we can allow for randomness and human error and character flaws and all these other things. But generally speaking, there is a set of people in this world who knows what's going to happen ahead of when we find out, which means much of it is already in process and we have no idea it's happening. Donald Trump is speaking into a future that he knows will exist, and he is also speaking that future into existence. Now, I know that that seems a little esoteric, a little ethereal. I'm not talking about him using the law of attraction or conjuring things in the world. I'm saying that he is ahead of us on a timeline, and certain events are going to present themselves because those events have already been decided upon. We just can't see them yet. He is speaking our ability to see these events and interpret them correctly into existence, which is essentially what speaks those events into existence when those events also depend on a common collective understanding of what is happening, the ability to differentiate the real, empirical, observable reality from the false reality. You have to remember the project overall is a great awakening. And that's the project that must be advanced at all times. The minutia, the details, the particular policies along the course to that great awakening may well be very relevant, but they are not as relevant as pushing that overall project forward. And so with that said, let's consider what we've seen in the last couple of days when it comes to this debt ceiling fight. Yesterday, we saw Republicans get together with Democrats. We can skip over all the horse trading and the mechanics of how it happened, but the Uniparty coalesced, they came together, and they passed a bill that allows the debt ceiling to simply not exist at all for most of the next 2 years, while the federal government might have the central bankers print up 4 or 5 or 6 trillion or more fiat regime bucks and then distribute them as they see fit to their friends in America and around the world so that they can continue on with the same globalist project, the same global agenda, which is global communism, is a one world government where everybody is equal except the very best people. Because why would the very best people be equal with everyone else? They are doing the important jobs to run the country. They're the ones who have invented all these wonderful things that we own, all these things we're able to do. Of course they deserve to get treated better than everyone else. You can't just have everybody be equal. Why would the most powerful people in the world want to do that? And of course they wouldn't, which makes it strange that they're convincing everyone else to want that. I mean, right? Isn't that a little strange that they would want everyone to be equal, just not at the level at which they're equal to their other peers? That's almost like they're telling everybody that on purpose, they want to create two entirely separate social classes. One who gets to make all the decisions and all the money and do absolutely whatever they want. And then the other one who doesn't get to do any of that stuff, but they get to bask in the enjoyment of equity and equality with all of the other people in their lower social class. But you can't call it communism. It's never communism. It's got to be something else. In fact, you don't even know the definition of communism. That is legitimately what they say all the time. Hey, you're a communist. You don't even know the definition of communism. Well, yeah, I do. You are an example of the definition of communism. You don't even know the definition. Well, how about this, commie? How about this? You give me whatever definition of communism you think is appropriate, and I will prove by that definition that what the global regime is pursuing is communism, and I will prove that you yourself, for supporting that, are in fact a communist. How about that? You choose what definition you like for the word communism. I will use your definition and prove it to you anyway. How about that? They will never give you a definition at that point. Is it because they themselves do not know the definition of communism? Well, yes, that's a big part of it. They have no idea what communism means. They just think it's something bad that people who aren't them do. But also, they're just liars, and they don't want to have you calling them communist because they think it's rude. You're not allowed to call people out for being communist, just like you're not allowed to call them out for being liars. In polite conversation, you cannot mention when other people are doing terrible things like lying or just being overtly evil or, of course, communism. That's part of the party of false decorum. We talked about it at the beginning. They don't like Trump because Trump tells the truth about things he's not supposed to be talking about. That is what they actually believe. There is a set of things that no one is allowed to talk about because it just makes people look bad. And they think that everyone is like they are. And so it's not just them that don't want the truth said in front of them. It's everybody. Nobody wants to hear the truth about anything. That's the policy. That's called manners. That is why when you build a society around the enforcement of nonsensical manners, you end up in the sort of situation we're in. And building a society around a number of nonsensical manners, well, that sounds kind of like constructing a world around a party of false decorum. And that's exactly what we have. I mentioned the other day that the narrative impact of this debt ceiling fight is the key. And the narrative impact, in large part, is that everybody sees right in their faces now that there is a uniparty. We're being told by the media, by the news on television, that this is a historic achievement, a historic act of bipartisanship. We have saved the country from certain financial ruin by coming together at the last minute and passing this bill with Republicans and Democrats, a big, big number. 314 votes to 117. That's how many people knew it was critical for us to save the financial future of the United States of America by allowing the government to spend money endlessly on whatever it wants with absolutely no chance of limitation, at least for almost another 2 years. You see, they saved the country by making sure that the regime and the Uniparty had the ability to change our $31 or $32 trillion debt into a $36 or $37 or $38 trillion debt. And the truth is, there's nothing stopping them from going even so much higher. And Joe Biden doesn't have to worry about it again. They don't have to have another fight about it next year during election season. None of that is going to happen. The issue is just gone now. The Uniparty has opened up our economy to all the debt the central bankers want to laden us with. And for generations, we will be indentured servants to those global bankers as we are now in order to pay off this debt that we didn't vote for, didn't support, didn't benefit from. But hey, we own it. It's all ours. Our elected officials voted for it. And that matters. As long as those officials are really elected, no one can say that we have taxation without representation. Of course, if those officials aren't elected, Well, then what does it mean? Because those officials aren't elected. Oh yeah, stolen elections, they matter again. Isn't that crazy? We can spend all our time talking about wee-wees and hoo-ha's. We can spend all our time talking about the debt ceiling. All of these, again, are important issues. But you think you're going to elect a regime politician like Ron, who denies election fraud, and he's going to get in there and solve these issues by focusing on the details of these important policy matters? That's what's going to solve it. That's going to solve what's happening in Congress right now. That's going to solve 314 members from both parties voting to allow the government to print money and spend money on anything forever. Well, that's not going to work. It seems like everyone understanding that none of these people are sitting in office legitimately in the first place. Well, that might have a bigger impact. Maybe at that point, people would get off their asses and say, wait a second, none of these people are even legally representing us. They're making decisions to fill the minds of the nation's children with all this sickness and perversion, and they weren't even elected to make these decisions. They're choosing to spend us into oblivion, and they weren't even elected to make these decisions. They're supporting Nazis in Ukraine right now, and they weren't even elected to make these decisions. How does that happen? Can't we do something about that? Well, yeah, we can do something about that as soon as the rest of the country actually gets on board and participates. And until then, we're stuck like this, pretending that sending Christopher Rufo to Florida to get rid of DEI in some university is like a grand display of fighting back. Now, I'm not trying to knock the guy. Maybe he's really doing good work and trying really hard. I don't have anything bad to say about him. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on him. I'm just saying, as an example, this is what we are celebrating, and it gets us virtually nowhere. There is a problem, the one that everyone chooses to deny because they are literally scared of speaking up, because it's called the big lie. And it's not a conversation for polite company. In polite company, people are going to tell you, you're very stupid if you believe that elections are stolen. The big people let us make our own decisions every time. We go and we push the little buttons on the screen. The computers are very safe and very secure. It's technology. Duh. It works the best, better than paper, better than pens, all of it. Our elections are very safe and very secure. The big people, they let us make the decisions. And then, hey, we have to live with those decisions that we make. That's not what happens. How does anyone believe it anymore? And how are we going to keep pretending that the solutions are available through elections that we know are rigged? You can't fix the problem that way. And you can't fix the problem with politicians who pretend it's not that way. Pretending it's not that way is the number one signal that that person isn't on your side and isn't going to be on your side. And we pretend it's something else because they say the right things about wee-wees and hoo-ha's. How is that possible? How is it possible that Ron DeSantis can cover up stolen elections in our country, do nothing about them as governor of Florida, knowing that they exist in Florida? Now, if it's not kayfabe, then the only other option is that Ron DeSantis is exactly who he seems to be, a tool and a product of the regime sent to trick people into thinking that they are getting MAGA, but a nicer version with nicer packaging. Your wife will like it a little bit more. Your barista might not be so insane. Your wife's boyfriend might be more likely to high-five you at the gym. You've signed up for the luxury package. It's like Trump, but even better, to the point where it's not like Trump in any of the important ways. And why is that? Why do you prefer that? Oh, it's because you don't want your life changed in any of those important ways, because when those important things get changed, your life might get changed. And we are dealing with that now from the Uniparty right, the same way we were dealing with it from the Uniparty left in 2020. It's no different. The reactions to Trump are no different. The reactions to Trump supporters, the absolute disdain is no different. They call us cultists. They're not joking. They think we are the ones in the cult and that they are all totally normal. Jack Posobiec posted a great meme today. I haven't seen it before. I'm sure that someone else came up with it and Jack posted it out. It doesn't matter. I'm just saying it's on Jack's feed. That's where I saw it. It's all the NPCs in the crowd. You know, the little NPC head, the non-player character. They're all gray. They have the triangle for the nose. You know what I'm talking about. It's a video game reference. You are the player in the video game. You go around the world. All the other video game characters are non-player characters. They act in the way the computer tells them to act. The program tells them to act. Those are NPCs. So the NPCs are all standing around looking exactly alike, expressionless faces, all saying Trumpers are cultists. And that's really what we have here. The TV tells people that Trumpers are cultists. They're the ones not thinking for themselves. And everybody agrees that Trumpers are cultists. Apparently unable to think their way out of that one, even though Trump's people are the ones who, more than anyone else, did not take the vaccine that we are now being told is Trump's vaccine. So if we're cultists, we can't be all that cultish. But the point is, this is exactly what we saw in 2020 from the Uniparty left. We are going to get the same version of it. It's going to have the same censorship, the same cancel culture, all of it. Maybe we'll get lucky. And the Uniparty right, having maintained closer relationships with Trump supporters over the last few years, maybe most of them will come down off this thing more quickly and come back into the fold. But there's also the chance that these people are going to lose their shit just like the leftists did. Now, what we don't need to lose our shit about is the debt ceiling deal. There is an inevitability to the financial collapse that we are going to see with the currency and with the currency competition throughout the world. We got to get rid of the central banks. We got to get rid of the global regime. The control they hold over our currency, our money, our spending, and our choices in this nation must be removed. It's not going to be the prettiest process in the world, but it has to happen. At the same time, all of them want the currency to collapse and the economy to collapse because they need us to beg for the Great Reset. They need us to beg for the central bank digital currency. So all of this is going to happen regardless of the debt ceiling. The bad thing is coming either way. It's a matter of how we talk about it and how society understands it to have happened. The establishment now owns it all. They have shown everybody that the Uniparty exists. I said on Devolution Power Hour last night, I stopped by to hang with the boys for like a half an hour at the beginning of the episode if you want to go back and watch it. But I said that in the last week, and this is obviously just a guess about the numbers, but it's entirely possible that 10% of the country heard the word Uniparty for the first time. There might be millions of people understanding the concept of a Uniparty for the first time based on this debt ceiling negotiation. If I'm right about that, that is a massive advance in terms of propelling the awakening forward. That is a massive advance in narrative for all of the normies and the villagers to begin understanding that there is actually something else going on in the world beyond what they see and perceive. This is not Democrats versus Republicans. It's Democrats and Republicans versus the people. That is what it has been for a very, very long time. And people have to understand the Uniparty in order to understand the implication of that statement. We've heard comedians and entertainers, thinkers, writers, whoever, for years and years, telling us that Democrats and Republicans aren't different. And it always sounds wrong. We're like, hey, that can't be true. One of the parties wants abortions available all the way up to 9 months and even after. And one of the parties is totally against abortion. And on the ground level, on the person level, that may well be true. But on the national level, on the organizational level, at the top rungs of this political ladder in this country, they don't have different opinions and beliefs on this stuff. To them, the abortion debate is just a way to keep people attached to issues they can't really affect, keep them divided, keep them fighting all the time so that everything else can be done without their knowledge. You see what we actually have in the world up until these last couple of years. It was essentially unlimited abortion. So you had two sides arguing about something that one side didn't want to change at all, and the other side just kept saying, well, we can't change that. And that's what it all is. It's just marketing. It's just the Uniparty. They have their agenda, and even people who disagree with their agenda can be leveraged and bought off or compromised to go along with the agenda. They're not two opposing parties. They're two halves of the same thing working together to fool the people and advance a global agenda. And nothing can be more obvious. It's becoming obvious for average citizens, and the impact of that understanding that both sides of the political spectrum, both sides of the Uniparty, are aligned against the citizens, that is a major wake-up that people are beginning to understand. And when they do understand that, who do they immediately know is absolutely not part of that? Well, the answer is Donald Trump. It's not Ron DeSantis. No one can confidently say that they know Ron DeSantis is not part of that Uniparty problem. And I'm not saying he's definitely not. Maybe he's not. Maybe. That would be nice to hear. That would be good news. But right now, there's no reason to believe that he's not. He's choosing to run in an election, pretending as a foundational principle of his campaign that our elections are safe and secure. So who is he fighting for when he says things like that? And when he portrays that to the nation? People are waking up to all of this, and they know that Donald Trump is not part of that. Donald Trump is literally identified in people's minds as not part of that, because both sides of the Uniparty attack Donald Trump relentlessly, and they have for 8 years. There's no argument. There's no old tweet. There's no nothing that can change that in the minds of the American public. They understand that Donald Trump is not part of the Uniparty. In fact, the Uniparty hates Donald Trump. And now people are understanding that the Uniparty hates them too. That is a major wake up. When people realize that, they say, oh, wait, Trump's the guy who's not that thing? Well, maybe I better listen to Donald Trump, and maybe this time I should try to hear him. I'll be back tomorrow at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening to this episode for free, you can support me and support the show and the work I do by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can do so for as low as $50 a year or $5 a month. Comes out to under a quarter per episode, and you'll blast right through the paywall for all of the writing. The merch store is www.cancelcouture.com, and you can find everything else by heading to Linktree, linktree.com/I'm your moderator. And I'll see you soon out on the range. It's high!